New CEO fired me without knowing I became the owner 2 days ago. The board meeting is going to be fun. New CEO fired me without knowing I became the owner 2 days ago. The board meeting is going to be fun. They thought firing me would be the end of my story. They were wrong. My name is Cameron Blake, and what happened in that boardroom 3 days ago changed everything. But to understand how a 25-year veteran was humiliated in front of his peers, only to turn the tables on a Fortune 500 CEO, you need to know about the silver pen in my pocket, and the phone call that came 72 hours earlier. Let me take you back to the moment everything went sideways. I was standing outside the conference room, holding a bouquet of red tulips. A simple gesture, I told myself. A way to welcome Adrian Cross, the new CEO. After 25 years at Meridian Corporation, I had learned that respect always mattered more than titles. I wanted her first morning to feel like she was joining a family, not just a company. But the moment I walked in, the air shifted. Adrian didn't smile. She didn't even glance at the flowers. Instead, she adjusted her tie and said, clear and sharp enough for everyone to hear, "Cameron Blake, your time here is over." For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. But around the table, 2 freshly promoted vice presidents sat stiff, their pens ready, like they had been waiting for this moment. I looked at Adrian, searching for the trace of a smirk, some clue this was just a bad joke. But it wasn't. She slid a manila envelope across the polished table, her eyes flat, already dismissing me. My brain refused to process it. 25 years of midnight calls. 25 years of saving supply chains, surviving audits, putting this company before everything else. And it all collapsed into a single cruel moment. No acknowledgement. No thank you. Just a surgical cut. The humiliation deepened when Adrian leaned forward, her voice carrying so the entire room could hear. This marks the beginning of cultural reform. Meridian must shed its relics to survive, and Cameron's departure will be our signal of change. Gasps rippled through the silence. Every eye turned toward me, not with respect, but with pity. The tulips in my arms suddenly felt foolish. I set them down on a side table, their fragrance heavy in the stale air. If you love stories about underdogs who refuse to stay down, and the sweet justice that comes when arrogance underestimates experience, make sure to like this video and subscribe, because every day I share new stories that prove it's never over until you decide it is. I reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed against the engraved pen I always carried, the one given to me on my 25th anniversary. My name etched in silver glinted faintly under the fluorescent light. I clenched it tight, grounding myself against the tidal wave of humiliation. But here's what Adrian didn't know. Here's what no one in that room knew. 2 days earlier, I had signed papers that made me the majority owner of the very company she thought she controlled. Adrian sat taller, believing she had staged her grand moment. She had no idea this wasn't her triumph. It was the spark. 2 days before the humiliation, everything had already changed. My phone rang late on a quiet Sunday evening. I almost ignored it. I had been trying to lose myself in a book, anything to drown out the worry stirred up by rumors of a new CEO. But when I saw the name flashing across the screen, I froze. Theodore Hartwell. Theodore wasn't just the founder of Meridian Corporation. He was the company. Even years after retiring, his presence lingered in the marble hallways like a ghost. When Theodore called, you answered. Cameron. His voice was steady, deliberate, the voice of a man who never wasted words. I need to see you. Minutes later, I was seated in his oak-paneled study, surrounded by the scent of leather and tobacco. Theodore sat behind his desk, papers neatly stacked in front of him. His eyes still carried that sharpness I remembered from the crisis years, when it felt like he could see 10 moves ahead of everyone else. He slid the papers toward me. I've decided it's time to hand this company's future to someone who has earned it. I blinked. Theodore, you mean? Yes. He cut me off, leaning back. I'm selling my remaining shares, 42%, to you. The words didn't sink in right away. I had spent my career fighting to keep this company alive, never once imagining I could own even a fraction of it. My pulse quickened. This was either salvation, or the most elaborate trap I'd ever seen. Then Theodore opened a desk drawer and pulled out a silver pen. He placed it carefully in my hand. "This was mine when I signed Meridian's founding documents," he said. "It's more than a pen. It's a symbol of trust. If you sign these papers, Cameron, you're not just an employee anymore. You're the guardian of what this company stands for." I stared at the pen, its weight pressing into my palm. Signing meant my name would be written into the foundation of Meridian, not as a caretaker, but as an owner. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Because," Theodore replied, his tone low and deliberate, "I've watched the board circle like vultures. I know who is loyal to Meridian, and who is loyal only to themselves. You've sacrificed more than anyone, sometimes too much. I trust that loyalty." My throat tightened. I felt the pieces of a plan sliding into place. Theodore had been right. Sometimes you had to wait for people to reveal their true nature. I signed. The silver pen glided across the page, and when I looked up, Theodore's gaze had hardened. "One more thing," he said. "We'll keep this quiet for now. I want to see who reveals their true nature when they believe you have no power. Their arrogance will expose them. And when the time comes, you won't just defend yourself, you'll decide this company's future." That's when I realized this wasn't just about ownership. It was about watching who people became when they thought no one was keeping score. And what I learned in the next 48 hours would change everything. 2 days later, Adrienne Cross would walk into Meridian believing she was in control. She had no idea the silver signature already inked had made her the intruder. The morning after Adrienne's announcement, I returned to my office carrying an empty box instead of tulips. The walk down the corridor felt heavier than usual, silence pressing in from all sides. Conversations stopped when I passed, not out of malice, but from that awkward sorrow people feel when they witness something unjust and can't do anything to stop it. Inside my office, pale strips of light cut through half-drawn blinds. I set the box on my desk and began gathering my things. Framed photos from successful projects. Worn binders filled with crisis reports that had once saved millions. A chipped coffee mug that had survived countless overnight shifts. A bronze paperweight, a gift from the Portland dockworkers after I'd helped them through the 2018 strike. The leather portfolio that had traveled with me across 3 continents. Through the glass walls, I saw colleagues trying not to look, while others made no effort to hide the sadness in their eyes. I knew that look. Pity mixed with helplessness. The same look I'd once seen on dockworkers when a shipment was held for inspection, knowing no amount of effort could change the outcome. As I folded the jacket that had hung on my chair for years, memories came flooding back. Nights spent alone in airports, sleeping upright in plastic chairs while waiting for customs clearance. Dawn calls to reroute trucks during driver strikes. And the memory that still ached most, the day my father was buried. I could see it clearly. I was in the operations war room, walls plastered with maps and red markers. A blizzard had shut down shipping lanes, threatening to derail a multimillion-dollar delivery. I stayed, directing logistics like a general in battle, convincing myself the company's survival justified missing my father's funeral. I never forgave myself for that choice. It was an invisible scar I carried alone. Now, as I looked at the faces outside my office, I wondered if anyone really knew the cost of my loyalty. The boardroom could erase me with a single letter, yet the sacrifices I made were carved into me permanently. And strangely, there was pride in that. My name might not be on the building, but its foundation had been built with pieces of my life. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Morrison, one of the longest-serving managers in supply chain. A man who had weathered every storm at my side. His words were simple. "No one here has forgotten you, Cameron. Not now. Not ever." The quiet pride swelled inside me, dulling the sting of humiliation. Nostalgia wrapped itself around the moment like a bittersweet cloak. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with the knowledge that my sacrifices had been seen, remembered, and respected by those who mattered most. But what happened next proved something I had almost forgotten. Sometimes the people who remember your worth aren't the ones in the boardroom making decisions. Sometimes, they're the ones who stood beside you when everything was on the line. By Thursday morning, the walls of Meridian were already echoing with a new rhythm, a colder one. I wasn't in the executive conference room, but word travels fast. Adrienne Cross was holding her first full meeting with senior leadership, and she wanted to make an impression. A colleague later told me she strode into the room as if she owned not just the company, but everyone sitting around that glass table. She wasted no time on courtesy. "We're no longer in the era of sentiment," she began, pacing deliberately, her voice sharp enough to slice through hesitation. "This company has carried too much old infrastructure for too long." The phrase stung, even hearing it secondhand. Old infrastructure. That was me. In that moment, Adrienne didn't just dismiss my contributions. She insulted every late night, every crisis survived, every ounce of loyalty I had poured into keeping Meridian alive. My chest tightened. Anger rose like a flame smothered for too long. I could accept being replaced. But being erased. That was contempt I could never forgive. Adrienne pressed on, her tone swelling with arrogance. "We will cut deeper," she declared. "Departments bloated with sentimentality will be streamlined. Risk management, compliance, logistics, they'll be rebuilt from the ground up. Loyalty to outdated methods is no longer acceptable." Her words cut like a knife. But the sharper wound came from the silence in the room, the compliance of those who knew better, yet chose safety over dissent. Then came a twist I hadn't expected. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from a young analyst I had mentored years earlier. He had been in the meeting, notebook open, quietly recording with his phone. Attached was an audio file. "Cameron," the note read. "You might want this. They shouldn't get away with it." I pressed play. Adrienne's voice filled my apartment, dripping with disdain. "Old infrastructure," she sneered. "Relics like Cameron are anchors weighing us down. We will make his departure a symbol." The recording was clear. Damning. Impossible to spin as anything but contempt. My grip tightened around the phone. Anger surged through me, but alongside it came something sharper, a steady, cold focus. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was evidence. Adrienne had given me the very weapon I could one day use to expose her, a blade forged from her own arrogance. For the first time since my dismissal, I allowed myself a thin smile. She thought she had silenced me. Instead, she had handed me her own words. And words have a way of echoing longer than power. What Adrienne didn't know was that while she was busy burning bridges and making enemies, the man she had mocked now held the keys to her kingdom. Friday morning arrived heavy with expectation. The board of directors gathered in the executive conference suite, a room designed to intimidate. A mahogany table stretched nearly 20 feet. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed downtown Portland like a corporate painting. Leather chairs lined the table with military precision. At the far end sat one chair unlike the others. In front of it rested a placard in bold print. "Reserved. Majority shareholder." The sight drew subtle glances. Some directors hid their curiosity behind coffee cups, while others leaned closer, whispering speculation. The title carried weight. A majority shareholder could shift the balance of every vote, altering the company's future with a single decision. And yet, the chair remained empty. Adrienne noticed, but spun the silence into her own narrative. With a confident smirk, she tapped her notes. "You'll be pleased to know the new investor aligns fully with my vision for reform," she said smoothly. "Their absence today is simply a formality. Consider it a silent endorsement of the changes we are putting in place." Her words were meant to calm the room, but unease lingered. Directors exchanged looks, skeptical, cautious. The placard promised presence. Someone would eventually claim that seat. I wasn't inside yet. I stood just beyond the frosted glass doors, the silver pen heavy in my pocket. Theodore's pen. The weight of it grounded me, reminding me of the choice I had made only days earlier. My dismissal was still raw, but inside that room sat the stage for something far larger than humiliation. I drew a deep breath, squared my shoulders. It was time to show them who really held control. Not yet. Not now. Patience was my weapon. Inside, Adrienne's voice carried over the shuffle of papers and the rhythm of corporate theater. This company will no longer cling to outdated structures, she declared. We are moving leaner, sharper, faster. Through the frosted glass, I could see silhouettes shifting, directors leaning in, voices rising and falling. Adrienne's voice cut through it all. Confident, commanding, completely unaware that her own words were sealing her fate. And then, even as she spoke, I caught a whisper. One director leaning toward another, his question just audible through the stillness. Who exactly is supposed to sit in that chair? The question lingered, unanswered, heavy enough to settle over the room. The anticipation swelled. No one inside knew that the silence outside belonged to me, and that when I chose to enter, everything they thought they knew would change. The hallway felt colder than the air inside. My shoes echoed against the marble floor as I stood, the silver pen clutched in my hand. Its weight was steady, reassuring. Yet my pulse betrayed me, beating a little too fast, as if it knew what was about to unfold. Behind the frosted glass, Adrienne's voice boomed. Today marks the beginning of a new era for Meridian Corporation. Even through the barrier, I could hear her cadence, a salesman's rhythm, practiced to sound like inevitability. We're restructuring top to bottom. Dead weight will be trimmed. Inefficiencies eliminated. We are no longer bound by the past. Her confidence bled through the walls, sharp as broken glass. Inside, directors nodded, or pretended to. They had already learned that Adrienne rewarded allegiance. I tightened my grip on the pen. Theodore's words echoed in my mind. This is more than ink, Cameron. It's a promise. The memory steadied me. Still, tension crawled along my skin like static. Timing was everything. I couldn't step inside too soon. From where I stood, I could see the secretary pacing nervously in the hallway, shuffling papers as though each one weighed more than the last. She clutched a folder, thick with filings, no doubt, and kept glancing between the frosted glass doors and her phone. Something was pressing on her. When Adrienne paused to sip her water, the secretary slipped into the boardroom. Her whisper wasn't nearly as discreet as she intended. The ownership filings were updated this morning. Through the glass, I saw Adrienne's posture stiffen. For half a second, her polished rhythm faltered. Her grip on the folder tightened, knuckles whitening before she forced her trademark smile back into place. As I was saying, she announced, louder now, almost defiant, our path forward is clear. The new investor aligns with me completely. Their interests are my interests. There's nothing to worry about. The directors nodded, but their eyes betrayed them. They had seen the hesitation. They had heard the crack in her voice. Outside, I exhaled slowly. My moment was close, but not yet. Patience was the knife that cut the deepest. The higher her arrogance climbed, the harder her fall would land. I rolled the silver pen in my palm, its cool weight steadying me. The tension in the air was no longer mine alone. It seeped through the boardroom doors, curling around every director at that table. Adrienne believed she held control. She believed that chair at the end of the table was her allies. She believed the filings didn't matter. She couldn't have been more wrong. Inside, her confidence swelled. She paced before the directors like she owned them, her voice sharp and commanding. Progress demands boldness, she declared. We've already begun trimming the fat. With your votes today, we'll make it official. Together, we're writing the future of Meridian. A few directors voiced support. I think Adrienne is right, one said cautiously. Efficiency is the only way forward, another chimed in. Relief washed over Adrienne's face. Her shoulders loosened, Her stride turned triumphant. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself to smile like victory was hers. Through the frosted glass, I watched silhouettes lean back in their chairs. Her speech had swayed them. My chest tightened. Maybe I was too late. Maybe Theodore's silver pen and those signed papers were just symbols, meaningless against her momentum. My fingers clenched the pen until its edges dug into my skin. Doubt pressed against my ribs like a weight. I imagined the directors raising their hands, Adrian collecting her votes, my legacy crushed beneath her arrogance. And then, an interruption. The secretary burst back into the room, breathless, clutching her phone. "You need to see this," she said, her voice cutting the tension like glass shattering. Confusion rippled through the room. Directors reached for their devices. Screens lit up. Adrian frowned, irritation flashing before her expression cracked wide open. On every screen glowed the same words. Notification of ownership change. As of Tuesday morning, Cameron Blake holds 42% of voting shares in Meridian Corporation. This update supersedes all prior records. Effective immediately, board recognition of ownership is required. The silence was instant. Chairs creaked as directors shifted, rereading the words in disbelief. Adrienne's relief evaporated. The practiced mask she wore so tightly slipped away, leaving only the pale panic of a woman who knew the ground beneath her had just disappeared. Out in the hallway, I let out a long breath. The weight of doubt lifted. What replaced it was resolve. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The boardroom air was suffocating when I finally pushed the door open. Frosted glass swung wide, and every head turned as my shoes clicked against the polished floor. I didn't rush. I walked with the steady rhythm of someone who belonged. In my hand, the silver pen caught the light, gleaming like a blade. It was no longer just a gift from Theodore. It was a reminder that my signature carried more power than Adrienne's entire performance. Adrienne froze mid-sentence. Her eyes widened. The mask cracked. This is a mistake," she stammered, clutching the folder. "The SEC filing must be wrong. Blake was terminated. He has no standing here." Her voice wavered, stripped of authority. I didn't answer. Not yet. I let silence press down on the room, heavier with each second. My gaze locked on hers, calm and unflinching. Around us, directors shifted in their seats, sensing the tide turning before a word was spoken. Adrienne tried again, louder this time, her voice trembling. "This filing is an error. It has to be." But her words carried no weight. Finally, I took one deliberate step forward. The pen caught the light again. I didn't raise it. I didn't brandish it. I simply held it steady, the way you hold a truth no one else can deny. I stopped halfway to the chair marked majority shareholder. But I didn't sit. Not yet. Instead, I stood beside it, silent, my eyes locked on Adrienne. The effect was instant. Her face paled. Her words broke into nervous muttering. She gripped the table as if it could steady her, but the room had already shifted. Every eye was on me now, waiting, not for her but for me. And still I said nothing. I let the silence stretch, sharp and unbearable, until even the sound of someone shifting in their seat felt deafening. Silence is a weapon. And I wielded it well. Adrienne's mask cracked as the truth dawned on her. Power didn't belong to the loudest voice or the grandest declaration. It belonged to the one person who didn't need to say a word. Finally, I lowered myself into the chair. The leather creaked beneath me, but in that boardroom, the sound carried like a verdict. Every gaze followed me, as though the simple act of sitting had declared war. I placed the worn manila envelope, the same one Adrienne had shoved across the table days earlier, right in front of me. Then, with a calm but cutting voice, I broke the silence. I do not accept the decision to terminate my employment. The words were steady, deliberate. Each syllable struck harder than any raised voice could. Adrienne lurched forward, her cheeks flushing red. "This is outrageous," she barked. He has no standing here. He was dismissed under my authority. I tilted my head slightly, voice cool as frost. Your authority ends where ownership begins. The room tensed. Directors exchanged glances, torn between habit and the undeniable shift before them. Adrienne slammed her fist against the table. The board has no obligation to recognize this. You're undermining everything we've built. Before she could continue, one of the senior directors, silent until now, leaned back in his chair, arms folded. His voice was calm, deliberate. For the record, I vote with Cameron. The effect was immediate. Another director nodded, almost in relief. Then another. And another. The dominoes fell, not with noise, but with the quiet certainty of people realizing the storm had passed and they no longer needed to cling to the wrong shelter. Adrienne's triumph drained from her face. She looked around, desperate, searching for allies. None met her gaze. I reached into my pocket and withdrew the silver pen. Its weight was familiar, grounding. Slowly, deliberately, I set it on the table. This pen, I said softly, was given to me by Theodore Hartwell when I signed the documents transferring ownership. It represents trust, continuity, and the will of this company's founder, something that does not die just because one woman calls me old infrastructure. I leaned forward and slid a document across the table. With one steady stroke, I signed my name. The scratch of the pen on paper was soft, but in that moment, it was louder than any gavel. For the first time in days, the weight in my chest lifted. This wasn't revenge. This was balance restored. Adrienne collapsed into her chair, pale and silent. The board no longer looked at her. Their eyes were on me. I set the pen down with finality, then looked straight at her. From this moment forward, I said evenly, you report directly to me. A ripple spread through the boardroom. Some directors straightened in their seats, others exchanged looks of relief. The tension that had strangled the room finally broke. One director exhaled so heavily it sounded almost like laughter. Another began to clap, hesitant at first, then firmer. Soon, others joined. It wasn't thunderous applause. It was the kind of applause that spoke of people grateful to see justice restored. Adrienne's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Silence had finished her off better than words ever could. I picked up the silver pen again, its engraved surface glinting under the lights. A small smile tugged at my lips. This company doesn't need showmen, I said quietly. It needs guardians. The board nodded, the weight of the words settling into their bones. For them, it was closure. For me, it was triumph. Not loud, not vengeful, but steady, undeniable, and just. As I gathered my papers, the pen slid back into my pocket, right where it belonged. Liberation isn't about erasing the past. It's about proving that sacrifice still matters, that loyalty isn't a relic, and that integrity can outlast arrogance. For the first time in years, I walked out of a boardroom not as an employee, not as a scapegoat, but as the rightful steward of everything I had built. And the look on Adrienne's face, that hollow recognition of defeat, was more satisfying than any speech I could have made. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar. It arrives quietly, with calm hands and steady resolve. If you enjoyed this story about how patience can be the most powerful weapon of all, hit the like button and leave a comment with your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.